Hi guys, welcome to day 3 of your STAAR review. Before you get started, make sure that you have your long-term notes packet, you have your day 3 Constitution handout, a pen or pencil, a highlighter, and a journal. So, like we know, our goal is that 80% of us are going to pass the U.S. History STAAR. Now, to do that, I'm not going to say it's easy, but there are things we can do at home to make this happen. For example, there is a Quizlet on Google Classroom that's been there for a while, but I want to make sure you know about it. So on Google Classroom, on the left-hand side, go to STAAR Prep, and then it's this top link right here. It says STAAR Prep folder. There are Quizlets based on topic and also just as total that have a bunch of STAAR terms on them, so you can practice targeted on what you need or just do everything at once. So today we are going to be talking about the Constitution and how we got there. So go ahead right now and pull out in your STAAR review the long-term packet, go to the day 3 page, and get ready to take some notes. So, America fights and wins the American Revolutionary War. We have the Battle of Yorktown, the Treaty of Paris, and it's done. America is now its own country. So what do you have to do when you have your own country? Well, we won. Now we need to set up a government, okay? So we won. What is our government going to look like? Now, America's first attempt at a government is known as the Articles of Confederation. Slight problem here, though. They made it super weak because Americans feared about having another example of tyranny like King George. Now, that word tyranny means a leader who is super kind of aggressive and possessive over you. So, for example, pretend like you are dating a basketball player and then you decide, you know what, like this is not my lifestyle, like, I can't do this, I'm done. And so then you decide to date someone really short and just the opposite of an athlete. You kind of went overboard, right? You went from one extreme to the other because of your past experiences. That's just like how the colonists felt. They did not like the tyrannical reign of King George III and how abusive and oppressive he was, so they went for the complete opposite. They designed a government that was super weak and basically couldn't do anything. And make sure you're filling in those notes. So here's an example of just how weak the Articles of Confederation made the government. So there's this thing that happens called Shays Rebellion. So the government was trying to set up these taxes, but the thing is that the government wasn't allowed to actually enforce taxes. So obviously, like, people aren't going to want to pay them, right? Because there's no enforcement. So farmers started rebelling against the taxes. And states asked the federal government, the national government, to help stop the violence and the fighting over these taxes. But Congress literally could not do anything, because the Articles of Confederation restricted the national government so much that they couldn't even stop a rebellion in their own country. So finally, people in the U.S. realized, okay, the Articles of Confederation suck so bad, it's time for a new government. So they come up with the Constitution. The Constitution is going to replace the Articles of Confederation. It has sets up a government that is stronger and has 3 equal branches. Those are the legislative, are the people who write the laws, the executive, the people who enforce the laws, like the president, and the judicial, sounds like judge, right? The people who interpret the laws, like the judges in the courts. To make sure you're listening to me, go ahead, I want you to highlight these 2 terms, the Constitution and equal branches. Equal branches meaning that they all have the same amount of power. Okay, so how fun would the story of a government coming to life be without some drama? Let's look at people who argued over the Constitution. We are on to the Federalists and Anti-Federalists. So, Federalists were in support of the Constitution, alright? Make sure you fill in that word for. Now, the reason they liked it so much is because they wanted a strong government. They saw the flaws in the Articles of Confederation, and they wanted to fix those. Now, they believed in this principle of federalism, meaning that the federal government is going to share power with the states. And that's how they'll be balanced out. Go ahead and highlight this term federalism for me. And lastly, some major leaders for the Federalist Party were Alexander Hamilton and John Jay. Now, these 2 guys, hello there, gentlemen, very handsome. These two guys write these things called the Federalist Papers. These were a series of essays that were trying to convince people to support the Constitution so we could vote on it and pass it and set up this new government. Again, they were convincing Americans to ratify, which means to approve. Fill in this word ratify and highlight the term Federalist Papers. Now, the cool thing about knowing the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist is anti means against or opposite. So if you know one of the group's beliefs, you just do the opposite and you already know the others. Just memorize one of them. So here's where the drama kicks in. Anti-Federalists, like you may have guessed, are against the Federalists. They are against the Constitution. They want a weak federal government because they don't want a repeat of KG3. They don't want another King George III bossing them around and abusing his power. Now, they're specifically worried about individual rights. They don't think that the Constitution alone does enough to protect the rights of everyday people like you and me. So they demand something called a Bill of Rights to be added to the Constitution, which will be there to protect individual rights. And so the Federalists are like, oh my gosh, okay, we'll do this. Will you sign it now? And the Federalists are like, okay, fine. So finally, we have the Constitution ratified with the Bill of Rights added on as the first 10 amendments. Okay, so let's take a look at the Bill of Rights, which are the first 10 amendments of the Constitution. Before we dive into specifics, I want to highlight some trends that could help you out on the STAAR. So if you come to a question about amendments, keep in mind that Amendments 4 through 8 are there to protect you when ... when you get arrested, when you get pulled over. So they're there to protect you when you're up against the law. Now, the 9th and 10th Amendments are there to limit the power of the federal government. Highlight that word limit for me. That means that the federal government can't do whatever it wants. Go ahead and also highlight the terms freedom of speech, freedom of the press, religion, quartering, and warrant. Okay, let's go ahead and practice the 10 Amendments hand signals. Go ahead and do them with me as we go. Alright, so the First Amendment has 5 parts. We have the freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, freedom of petition. We have the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. We have the Third Amendment, the Quartering Act. 1, 2, 3, here's a quarter. We have the Fourth Amendment, knock, 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 don't let him in without a warrant. No unreasonable search and seizure. The Fifth Amendment, right to remain silent, due process of law. The Sixth Amendment, right to a speedy trial. The Seventh Amendment, here's you, here's the judge, here's the jury, right to trial by jury. The Eighth Amendment, wringing someone's neck. No cruel and unusual punishment. If you get pulled over for speeding, they're not going to throw you in jail for 20 years. That makes no sense. The Ninth Amendment, raise it up, power to the people. Just because the right isn't listed in the Constitution doesn't mean that you don't have it. And the 10th Amendment, push it away, super important. Any powers not given to the federal government in the Constitution are given to the states. Okay, so now go ahead and get out your Day 3 handout you picked up, and we are going to do some practice. So first things first, we are going to do some document analysis. So let's take a look at document A. So when I see this image, I notice that, okay, it's a ship, and it's kind of leaning to the side a little bit. And the sail says Articles of Confederation. So I guess the ship must represent the Articles of Confederation. Now, when I know a ship is in water, I know that stuff that'll give it trouble are big waves. Now, I see some big waves, and they have words on them, like no power to collect taxes, no power to raise an army, no national court system, no power to enforce treaties, and then the base of it is no power to enforce laws. And the title of this image is Rough Sailing Ahead. So that must mean that the ship isn't going to encounter some problems that are caused by these waves. With those hints in mind, go ahead and answer questions 1 through 4 under document A. Alright, let's look at document B, which is entitled Problems under the Articles of Confederation. Here is a quote from George Washington in a letter to James Madison in 1786. Let's see what he has to say. We are quickly coming upon anarchy, no rules. I am worried and melancholy, sad. that in only a few years our current government may soon dissolve and it is evident to me that this confederation cannot continue. Congress cannot run the country alone. There is no stronger evidence for this than the uprising and rebellion led by Daniel Shays in Massachusetts. This government cannot simply stop protesting farmers. We must finally admit that a president and court system are necessary to ensure each citizen receives life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay, so Washington's obviously concerned about something, right? And he mentions the current government being not working because there's no rules and the Confederation. What was the name of that government that came before the Constitution again? Maybe that's what he's talking about. He also mentions this uprising with a guy named Daniel Shays. What rebellion did we just remind ourselves about where the government couldn't control the people? And then finally, George Washington gives some advice, right? He says, we must finally admit that a president and a court system are necessary. Remember, the Articles of Confederation, you guys, did not allow for courts or a president. Now, Washington is saying that we need those. So go ahead and pause me and answer your Document B questions now. The page numbers correspond to pages in your journal if you need some extra help. Alright, for Document C, we have the 3 branches of the Constitution. Here's the quote. The President shall have power by and with the advice of and consent of the Senate to make treaties, provided 2/3 of the senators present concur. That's in the U.S. Constitution. That is Article 2, Section 2. So basically, if it says the president has the power to make treaties as long as he has the approval of 2/3 of the Senate. So he can't just do it alone. He has to have the approval of part of Congress too. Why would the president have a check on his power? Go ahead and answer questions 1, 2, 3, and 4 using your journal for help. Alright, so further down on this page 2, you'll see a chart with the words Federalist and Anti-Federalist. This is like a little cheat sheet to help you with the activity on the next page, which is where you're going to be looking at a quote, identifying it as being Federalist or Anti-Federalist with an F or A/F, and then a follow-up question. So let's do the first one together. So the quote says, we must ratify the Constitution now. Okay, so going back to my chart, I'll see who wanted to ratify the Constitution. It was the Federalists. And ratify means to approve. So the Federalists wanted to approve the Constitution. So down on my notes, I'm going to write F for Federalist, and ratify means to approve. Okay, so now go ahead and pause me and finish this activity on page 3. You can listen to music quietly if you want to, and come back to this video once you finish. Alright, so if you're watching me now, that means that you've finished the other activity and you are ready to hear the directions for the activity we're going to do when I call us back whole group. So we're going to do a Bill of Rights gallery walk. Kind of similar to what we did a couple of classes ago. There are 31 stations, 1 scholar per station, 20 seconds per station, and here's what you're going to do. You are going to see a quote or an excerpt or something from most likely a political figure that you are familiar with, and you are going to tell me which amendment that quote or picture relates to and how you know. So you'll fill out amendment number and what gave it away. Make sure you do this for all 31 stations, 1 scholar per station, 20 seconds per station. Use your cheat sheet on your long-term notes packet for the Bill of Rights if you need it. And if you're listening carefully, here's your hint for the day. The answers to the Federalist or Anti-Federalist activity you completed can be found on the About section at the top part of the Google Classroom page. Now, if you are done early and I have not called this back whole group yet, here's what you're going to do. You're going to practice using that quiz that I told you about. So go on to Google Classroom, go to STAAR Prep and STAAR Prep Quizlets, do some games, do some flashcards, whatever you want until I call us back together.